Welcome, Becky.
It's part 2.
I know. It's been a cliffhanger since our first conversation. And now this
I
is the close
am
of it.
so all bought in to what the Keith family is doing to transform not only what we are doing domestically, what's happening domestically, but internationally. And so I hope if you're joining us today, you were able to log in and listen to the episode with Jeff Keith, who is the founder of the Guardian Group, which is probably in the top 5 most impactful and inspiring nonprofits that I have ever heard of in my career.
And let me just tell you, Becky actually mid-podcast got out and started a monthly gift to the Guardian Group.
I didn't even tell him I did that.
I know, but I just feel like that speaks to that this was so impactful to both of us. This
Yeah,
story.
I was so rude that he was talking and I wasn't listening because I had to make a gift to that nonprofit immediately. But we want to pivot today because I want to say Jeff is attacking this just horribly systemic problem of human trafficking domestically. And so we're going on the back end of that with his wife today, this is Shannon Keith. Welcome to the show, Shannon, who is the founder and chairwoman of Sudara. And she is taking these victims of sex trafficking and human trafficking, and she is giving them a vibrant and whole life and putting so much goodness into the world. So normally this is the place where we would kind of read your bio, but I just felt like this nonprofit is so powerful. What you've been able to do, Shannon, is so powerful. I wondered if we could just start today with this trip to India and I'm seeing like a very like 2 roads diverged, not into a woods, but in the middle of a major Indian metropolitan area. And you talk about this journey that you had where you decided to choose to walk toward this problem that you saw instead of turning away. And I wonder if that's kind of the starting point. You could talk to us about who you are and what Sudara is.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Speaking after my husband, Jeff, is some big shoes to fill. He's such a great guy with a big vision. But it has been, really the privilege and honor of my life to have dedicated the last 15 years to doing all that I can, which is small in comparison to the need, but to do everything that I can and bring my whole self to helping women and children know their worth and their dignity. And that started back in this trip to India. So I guess we'll start there, Becky. Jeff and I were married. We got married in 2000. And the first trip we took to India was in 2004. And I think part of the reason that we are such good life partners is because we have a similar heart for the poor and the marginalized. And so that's really what has taken us on travels kind of around the world. What can we do to learn from our global citizens? What do we have to offer? So just kind of this mutual global exchange to be better and to do better. And so our travels took us to India in 2004, fell in love with the people, the culture, the nonprofit partners that we were working with over there that were helping some of the most marginalized people on the planet. These were, AIDS orphans, people who've basically been discarded by society, the very poorest of the poor and the most marginalized. And in India, they have the caste system, so the lowest caste. Anyway, fell in love with it, went back the following year in 2005, and our family dedicated a fresh water well in collaboration, and it just so happened to be put in a brothel community. So it was matched with this community. So being the woman on the trip of our family, because I was speaking to mostly a community of women, I was asked to share a few words. And that event just really shattered my heart into about 1,000 pieces, because I began asking our nonprofit partners in India, well, what do you mean a brothel community? What does that mean? Who are these people? Why are the children running around on a Wednesday mid-morning, not in school?
It sounds so medieval. Caste systems, brothel communities. I mean, it sounds like something that would have happened hundreds of years ago in a primitive society.
Which is why I was completely waylaid and shocked that this was 2005 and I was hearing all of these things. Just like you said, it almost sounded, if I wasn't experiencing it with my own eyes, I would have thought it wasn't true or someone was exaggerating or it was sensationalism. But I was there and I couldn't deny what I was seeing and experiencing. And so the more I asked, the more heartbroken I became. And I just thought, you know, these women need dignified options. If they don't want to sell their bodies for sex multiple times a night for survival of themselves and their children, like what else are they going to do? And there aren't a lot of government safety nets. The familial structure has obviously broken down for them. And so they really needed options and opportunity. These are just amazingly intelligent, resilient, smart women. So that's not the issue. They don't lack intelligence, they lack opportunity. And so being from a business mindset, my thought right then, sort of a flash of divine inspiration, it was literally, I felt like a download from God saying, pajamas. if you can sell something and use your skill set to provide revenue, that they could potentially have a different job than they're stuck in right now. And so that's kind of how Sudara was born. It was through that trip to India and through a really pragmatic, practical solution like pajamas that would help provide revenues so that they could have a different job.
Wow. And we said this right before we started, I just love that y'all tackle the biggest of problems with just, you know, everything you've got. And I love that you have, you know, oriented your life in that way to support and serve just the most underserved groups of people. I wonder if you could talk about, I know Sudara has kind of two sides that functions as one. One of those is the B Corporation, and I'd love for you to explain a little bit about what a B Corp is.
Oh, we have B Corp MV.
We do have B Corp MV, but I have a lot of respect for the process and the judicious ability to get that, you know, distinction it's just not handed out. And so I know there's a lot to that. But why did you structure Sudara in a way that's got this B Corp side and there's also the nonprofit side, and kind of explain what that is too?
Yeah, thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Well, back in 2005, when we first started, B Corps weren't a thing. It wasn't an entity yet, a distinction by the IRS and the states. And so at that time, it was like, okay, you want to help people? That's what nonprofits do. Nonprofits help people. And back in 2005, this was before Tom's Shoes. This was before any of the big, what we would call social businesses today, that thankfully 15 years later, we're so much smarter and evolved and we have so many more options. But the reason that I had started Sudara as a nonprofit, and it was actually called International Princess Project back in the day, it was really to just help women and provide this job creation. So we did that and formed a nonprofit board and did all of the things that nonprofit do. And our main program was job creation for women. That singular focus and that mission has always been the same from day one, and we haven't deviated from that. Now, fast forward a few years later, things like Tom's Shoes comes on the market as a business. You know, B Corps are a distinction that the states are recognizing. That was kind of an evolution. So in 2014, as the founder and a volunteer board member of the nonprofit, we decided together to spin the business component out and to have kind of a hybrid organization, two distinct entities with one singular focus for this synergy. So Sudara Freedom Fund is our nonprofit 501c3. So traditional nonprofit, people can make donations, and that really helps with all the wraparound services. Because as you can imagine, just because women need a job, they need lots of other things. These are highly traumatized women. Sometimes they need safe housing. They'll certainly need medical care, nutrition, support and help with their children. Many are single mothers. Many have STDs, including HIV. So the list goes on of the wraparound services that the nonprofit can really get a woman ready to be able to take that next step in her journey, which is likely a job or some other type of employment. And then that's where Sudara Inc. comes into play. So when we decided to spin the business out from under the nonprofit, at this point, then B Corps were a thing. So the first thing I did was register Sudara Inc. as a benefit corporation in the state of Oregon. And that is a distinction that I think 39, maybe growing, out of the 50 states have. So not all states have that distinction, but the vast majority do, and hopefully all 50 will at some point. Then to be a benefit corporation in our state, you have to have a third party certifying you. So you can't just raise your hand and say, hey, I'm doing good. Aren't I awesome? Really, a third party has to do sort of an audit to give you that stamp of approval that, yes, you're doing what you're going to do. We're with the largest certifying body, which is B Labs. And that community has over, I think it's like 3,500 certified companies. And it's a worldwide sort of phenomenon. So that's really great. So with that, you have to get a certain amount of points, and you do that through your governance and your financials and your transparency and your supply chain. And there's lots of ways that you go about getting this. And again, you don't have to just be a manufacturing. You can be any type of vertical. B Labs can be certified. So you can be an attorney and get certified. You can be, whatever it is, they have something for that. So we're really proud and honored to be part of that community. For the last 2 years, we've been we've gotten awards through, our governance policies and whatnot. So we're all about that community and really putting a stake in the ground and a flag to say you can do business better and you can use your business as a force for good. So that's what Sudara does. But again, hybrid organization with lots of synergy, but with one singular mission, and that's helping women and children achieve their potential in a life of freedom.
You have every reason to be proud of that. And I want to compliment you on something, because what I think is hard for particularly Americans to understand is this world of which you are going into. Your husband's working on a lot of the domestic issues. You're working internationally. And this is a world that we cannot wrap our minds around, because we don't understand what it means not to have readily accessible water or have services that can help lift us up when we're in a compromising position. And I think, Americans are traditionally very giving, big-hearted people. They want to serve. And, if we're looking at the philanthropy 1.0 version of giving internationally, like in the last 20 to 30 years, it was like just kind of throwing money at the problem. And the thing that I love so much about what you're doing, it's taken me forever to get to my compliment, is you've really gotten to that place where it's like, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, but teach him to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. I mean, that to me is the evolved 2.0 version of philanthropy and what we can do to move the needle. We're not trying to go in there and tell them their business, tell them what we think they need. It's like we are literally just trying to come into these spaces where people need love, they need protection, they need safety, and at the end of the day, they're going to need some sort of a path to a future. Because I think the thing that struck me the most when I watched your TED Talk, which if you have not watched Shannon's TED Talk, it is amazing. It is really fantastic. But there are children, and a lot of children living in this world, and they are as much a part of the enslavement as mom. Both of them are trapped. And so I want you to talk a little bit about that and how you came to kind of put your arms around him and lift him up and say, you can have a productive business and a career, and we can help you with that.
Yes, and thank you for that, because I think you're right. Americans traditionally, and kind of as a whole collective, are very generous people. I think we are still the most generous in terms of dollars giving around the globe. And though we're not perfect and we have a lot of warts that we're hopefully working on, we have definitely been a generous people. And I think you're spot on. And thank you for kind of recognizing what we're trying to do here, because we have traditionally as a group thrown money at problems, and then we don't see the change that we want to. And so then we throw more money at it, and we think it's like lack of money.
It's so counterintuitive, really,
Yeah, really, it's kind of like sometimes lack of focus or lack of where we're at. And so there is a place for philanthropy, just straight up throwing money. And that's usually in times of crisis, right? So like when, even domestically, like when Hurricane Katrina hit, like right away we go into crisis mode and we need to throw money. That is not the time to be like, oh, let me teach you how to fish right now as you're like on your rooftop.
Agreed.
And, like you just need to be rescued from that situation and stabilized. And then at the appropriate time, which is usually a fairly short amount of time, then we kind of move on to the next phase of help. There's a really good book that I read, and the authors' names are fleeting, but it's called When Helping Hurts. And I would recommend that as a resource list because it really talks about this. And I believe it was like the founder of World Vision and another large kind of helping body that kind of lays this out, right? So we mean to do good. We want to do good. Our intentions are good, but there's lots of unintended consequences that happen when we just continue to throw money at a problem and not really look at root systemic issues. So, the fact that we sort of needed to evolve was part of our learning, right? Like we didn't know that. We've learned a lot of stuff over the last 15 years. And I think that's just part of the human experience. Like none of us know everything right out the gate. So it's trial and error and failure, but learning from those failures and saying, okay, that didn't work. How do we do it better? How do we do it different? That's how Sudara has evolved, and really focusing on what we knew to be the case. It was all about job creation, right? And for the women, and even under the nonprofit, that was our program. And it's been really cool and validating to see that we are working on the world's to-do list. And what I mean by that is if you look at the UN's SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that were created by over 30 countries buying in, saying these are the top 17 problems that we need to focus on. They're very systemic. And if we focus on these problems, we can help our world, both from a humanitarian and sort of like a planet perspective. And it was really cool to see our mission before we even saw that list is like right in sync with that. And so of the 17, we really focus on 3, ending poverty, gender equality, and decent work and economic growth. Because we know when we focus on those, a lot of the other ones are taken care of as sort of like a secondary ripple effect. And there is so much research in the developing world that when you invest in women, they in turn invest in their communities and in their children. It's kind of a crazy, inspiring, wild statistic. I think it's like women invest more than 90% of their income back into their children and into their communities.
I would believe
when you give a woman a job and when you give her power and economic power and a voice at the table, not only for marginalized women, but for women in high leadership positions, they will in turn invest back in their communities, back in their children. And then the generational, this was a long way to get to to answer your question.
I'm loving it.
Generational cycle of poverty is broken. So when you talk about the children and why do we invest in children and how do we best invest in children, guess what? It's investing in their mothers, because they will in turn instinctively, intuitively know the right ways to build a better life for their children. And I think as human beings, mothers and fathers, that is universal. That transcends socioeconomic, language barriers, cultures, whatever. Parents want a better life for their children, period, unless they're a sociopath.
Yeah.
Which is a whole different issue.
Yeah, that's another nonprofit. We'll have to start to deal with that. So,
well, I mean, I love hearing your story and hearing your husband's story, because y'all were just so committed to the long game and you're so committed to the systemic problem that you're fine with knowing it's going to change and evolve over time as you get more data and you have more results and you meet more people and you just refine, and that mission gets brighter and brighter as you go. So I love hearing that, how you've adapted. I think that's a calling all of us should be looking at for whatever mission we're kicking down the field. Something that you said that I want to circle back to is just this idea that everybody wants to do good, majority, unless it's a sociopath. This is how we're going to do this on all of our topics. And one of those ways that I think is really, I don't want to say in vogue, but it's been more in the top of conversations lately, is just conscious consumerism. And, I think there is a big uprising. Some of the horrible things that have happened in manufacturing facilities overseas, specifically in the fashion industry, have brought that to light, and I know from running a small business in my past, my wife and I had a little handmade clothing business for several years, and we were really committed to some of those ideals. But to truly go back to your supply chain at every step and make sure that it is ethical and it is, has the best intent of all those pieces is so difficult to do. So I'd love if you want to shine light on how y'all are champions for that and, what sets you guys apart in that fight, and maybe educate us too.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking
Sure.
that question because it really is sort of near and dear to my heart. And I love that there's a pretty familiar term now around conscious consumerism and you know what that means. Because at the end of the day, none of us want to be employing slaves to give ourselves and our families and our homes, you know, comfort and meet our basic needs. And yet we do unintentionally. And so, you know, most of us financially support companies that if we knew what was going on, we would never necessarily support them because socially, ethically, whatever, they do not align with our values. And yet there's such a huge disconnect between kind of like the marketing and where the transaction's made and then where the goods come from. And that's the supply chains that you're talking about. And so really, conscious consumerism really means engaging with the economy with a lot more awareness and a lot more intentionality than just being kind of frazzled and like, oh, I just got to run to XYZ big box store and buy XYZ because, you know, I don't have any time in my life, right? Which most of us find ourselves in. At the same time, that can feel really overwhelming, you know, as a mother of three, as a business owner, as a nonprofit founder, as a wife, as, you know, fill in the blanks, all of the different roles that we wear. Like, how in the heck are we going to find margin in our life to do this intentional awareness shopping when really we just want to go to Walmart and buy whatever we need, right?
Or have them bring it to our house, right?
Yeah, or right, have Amazon deliver everything in a jiffy. And so really, to do it in a practical way, I would say you don't have to, you know, how do you eat an elephant? The adage goes one bite at a time. You don't have to swallow the whole thing. So instead of getting overwhelmed and having analysis paralysis, you can just say, hey, where do I tend to spend the most of my money, of my disposable income? Is it on food for my family? Is it on clothes? Is it on vacation travel? Like, what is it? And then just start there, right? Start with something small, one piece, one baby step. Is it coffee? I have a daily coffee habit. Okay, well, instead of going to XYZ fast coffee place, maybe you should research in your community who's selling direct trade coffee, who's doing fair trade, how are they dealing with the beans and the coffee farmers, right? That traditionally tend to get screwed in the supply chain because they might get pennies on the dollar for that cup that you're spending $5 for, right? So it could be as simple as that. Then you could move on to something like chocolate that has a lot of slave labor in chocolate. So you could research a little bit about Hershey's. There's like tons of really cool chocolate companies that have sprung up that are basically certified slave-free, right? So you could say, hey, I have an awesome chocolate addiction, and it's a really cool way to like gift a cool chocolate bar to someone to start the conversation, to say I'm not giving out slave chocolate at Halloween or whatever. I'm choosing to do this instead, right? So there's really simple ways that you can interact as a conscious consumer. And the more you get into it, it becomes like a healthy addiction. Yeah. Then you start going, okay, I got my coffee pretty much covered. And even if it's just 80% of the time, right? Because sometimes I'm on the road and I don't know, and I just have to go through the drive-thru, that's fine. But if you're doing 80%, like the 80-20 rule, you're doing like really well. And then you start getting into, oh, what about clothes? What about shoes? What about, what can I do? And you start buying better quality things. You might not buy, you can stay within your budget. So if you have a budget that's X amount of dollars, let's say $300 a month for whatever the category is, you don't have to say, to do good, now I have to increase my budget to $500. No, you say, how do I do good within that $300 budget? Maybe I buy less things that last longer, right? Those are like Sudara goods. So sure, can you get pajama bottoms that are less expensive at a big box store that may or may not employ slave labor? Absolutely you can. But ours are, you'll feel really good about that they're not employing slave labor. They're really high quality. We have very good standards. And so they're going to stay in your closet longer and they're going to stay out of the landfill, because that's what being a B Corp and a conscious consumer is all about. You put people and planet on par with profits. So we don't say profits are bad. No, profits make the world go round. You need to pay people a wage so that they can support themselves and their families, right? But you want to do so in a way that puts planet, so good products that stay out of the landfills is really important part of the equation, on par with the profits. So that's the way we do it. And then there's so many of us that we have personal budgets, but guess what? We also have budgets at our companies, right? You mentioned being a small business owner. So sometimes you need to buy gifts for your clients, for your employees. there are ways to do that. You can engage with companies like Sudara and others to say, hey, how can we partner together? How can I not only buy from you for my personal needs and for my Christmas gifts, because guess what? Holidays are right around the corner. We have flannels, flannel pajamas, Christmas jammies are like a thing. Awesome. We would love for people to consider us as like their go-to Christmas and holiday gift. But you could also be a business owner or a CMO, like a marketing director that has a budget where you have to buy X amount of gifts to send to your clients or your corporate events. Great. We want to partner with you there too. Right? So how can you use everything within your universe and your network, your personal budgets, your work budgets, your work, to align your values and your heart and your time? Because guess what? You're not only going to get a better product at the end of the day, you're going to have a higher satisfaction. Your employees are going to be more engaged, knowing that you as a business are choosing to engage with companies that serve the greater good. So again, it's like a triple win. We like to say at Sudara, there's no downside. You know, it's a win for the people in our supply chains. It's a win for you because you're getting something really cool and high value. It's a win for the person on the receiving end because they're getting a unique gift that they can feel good about. So really, there is no downside in engaging with good, conscious companies and being a conscious consumer yourself.
Somebody out there is listening right now, and they're a technologist, and they're also somebody who has a huge heart. Will you please create a platform by which busy mothers can go and find companies? I love the B Corp distinction because that is such a safe place to go, and you know you're automatically going to get, you know, a product that is coming from a very pure place. And I think none of us, you know, ask questions enough in the world right now about where our goods come from. And the thing I think I want people to know, at least that I'm taking from this conversation, is, you know, the way that a capitalistic society is moving us is to make us think that we need to have more automation. We need to, you know, get our things as quickly as possible. And it's like we need to rage against the machine because we need to be creating some pause to say, is this the right thing? Where is this coming from? I mean, to think that I am such a consumer of chocolate as a human being, and to think that I have never heard about a slave trade in chocolate, and I'm 41, is shocking to me. And my mind is racing in terms of what else have I unintentionally been negligent in supporting. And so I think this is a very cool time in history that we're standing in, where we can almost just demand this of our companies. And it is put on us to hold a higher standard for these huge Fortune 500 companies that deliver goods that we want. We've got to be saying, we're not going to align ourselves. Our family, my family of four, is not going to align ourselves with people who don't follow this sort of business model. And that, to me, is how you create an impact uprising. That is how you create a kindness revolution. And so you've already started that. I think it's so fantastic. I am just all about it. So when customers make a purchase on Sudara, what kind of impact are they making in your communities?
Oh, I love it. Thank you for that. And they're making a huge impact. And just to kind of go to your other question, there are quite a few for good marketplaces popping up.
Awesome.
So
Ooh,
I would
drop them
encourage
here. Yes, tell us a couple.
Google and just see. I would also encourage them to go to the B Lab website because there is a directory. So when I mentioned there's 3,500 companies, not just consumer brands, but also service companies that you want to interact with. So you can go and see who is B certified, and there's a directory there. So we can definitely follow up.
Let us know. We'll drop them in the show notes. So visit our show notes and we'll get you some of those. There you go. You're doing family pajamas this year for Christmas. Check out Sudara. I was literally just kind of putting a mental note there. My husband's dying inside probably.
Yes, and we will give a 15% off code for your listeners.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
It's under your chair right now, Becky. There's a coupon under your chair. We just want a prize.
Are you kidding? You were going to get all of our money anyway, but thank you for giving us that 15%. We will definitely take it, and thank you for doing that for our community.
Absolutely. And you know it'll be so fun. So the code will be do good, and it'll be good for like 30 days after this podcast airs. But what will be fun is we can come back using that code, because with our analytics on our website, we can actually track the impact that this podcast had.
My
which
mind
will be really fun.
just exploded.
Oh my God.
Okay, everyone who is in nonprofit marketing, in stewardship, in donor relations, that is a incredible hack right there of what to take back. Being able to connect a gift directly to its impact. If you can automate that, you are winning in this lifetime in your philanthropy.
And come on, we want to make the biggest impact possible.
Yeah,
so
we do.
spin that coupon
Yeah,
once we get
do.
it to you.
Yes.
Yes, better together. So the type of impact that you have is really this this holistic approach, because we obviously have to pay for the cost of goods, and we pay the women who make the products. But that is just one of the vocations that women get to choose. And this is where I really like to unpack it a little bit, because people think because we make like clothing and textiles, that that's the only job, right? But we know that not every woman in poverty who wants to remain free from the brothels wants to be a seamstress. So for instance, myself, I'm not a great seamstress. I have a sewing machine. I've kind of tried to do it. And in fact, even when I mocked up the first pajamas, I had to invite my friends who sewed, and I just, said, hey, I have wine and chocolate. Whoever has a sewing machine,
sustainable wine, sustainable chocolate.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. Would you come and help me? Because I'm not a great seamstress. So myself as an example, I may not choose to want to be a seamstress. It's a great job. It's awesome. Kudos to everyone who can do it, because for me, it's like very hard. So the revenues and the profits that are kicked off after, of course, people are paid a very good and fair wage for the products, we reinvest those profits back into the ecosystem. And so what that means is, in collaboration, because collaboration is an absolute core value with Sudara. So in collaboration with our partners in India, they're the ones on the ground in the trenches, speaking the language of the women and children that we're serving. Women can choose about 10 different vocational options, right? So the revenues kick off and are invested into skills training and job placement for the women. So not every woman wants to be a seamstress. If they do, great. They will likely be sewing some of our Sudara goods. But if they don't, maybe 90% want to do other things. And depending on their aptitude, there are different job and skills training options available. So for instance, some people born into the brothels, where it's been cyclical generational oppression, they may have never had the opportunity to go to school. They may not be literate. So there are only certain jobs that they could do that are really hands-on skills training that require a zero literacy. But lots of cool things still, like sewing and tailoring, like henna art, like baking, like doing some beautician, kind of esthetician school training. There are a lot of really good careers that don't require a high literacy rate. Then for some women who did have a chance to read and write and go to school, at least for some time, they may be able to do more advanced courses in computer desktop training, in other things, and being a translator, that sort of thing. And so depending on the aptitude and the desire of the woman, they can pick what vocational path they want. Then there's an 89% job placement rate, again, in partnership.
Wow, that's great.
Where women aren't only trained, but they actually land a job, because we know there's no good that comes when people are trained, but the unemployment rate is still huge, right? So skills training needs to actually translate to job placement, and that's where real impact happens. So in partnership, we've been able to help train over 1,200 women a year that go through these programs. So 1,200 women a year, again, are trained, and they actually get a job on the back end. And that's many more seamstresses than we have right now. So where the impact is so exciting and it scales is that as people buy more pajamas and Sudara goods, more monies are reinvested back into these programs. And so we could help more women. So we look forward to a day when we're helping 5,000 women a year, and then 10,000 women a year, right? And we just continue to scale that impact.
And what is more fulfilling to you as a donor than when your gift is just paid forward again and again and again and again? And that is the beauty of these sort of philanthropic models, I think. So bravo to you all. 1,200 people a year who would otherwise be enduring the worst of what this world has to offer to them now have a chance. And I would say if you had helped one person, that would have been extraordinary, but 1,200 is just fantastic. Congratulations.
Well, I was
Thank you. And I say thank you on behalf of all of our team and all of our team in India, because again, I just get the fun and the privilege of being like the talking head right now. But it's, I represent all of our team because it is teamwork that makes this happen, and working in collaboration with our partners in India. That's the most fun and the most gratifying part of our work.
Well, something that really struck us when we talked to Jeff, and I know this is in your ethos too, is that these numbers, they can be staggering, and the impact number is incredible to hear, to think that it's scaled to 1,200 people. Can you think of just one person, that has just struck a chord in your 15 years of doing this, that it's like, man, this is why we do this. This is the type of transformation, or just maybe the hope that was given, or maybe it's a story of philanthropy.
Yeah. I mean, I can think of many. Right? They're all so inspiring and amazing. But one that is so, so beautiful and really speaks to that paying forward is one of the gals that went through the program and then found a job, right? She came back to our partner in India and donated 100% of her first paycheck. And so was getting a paycheck, and she said, I want so many more women like me to experience this newfound freedom. I completely believe in what you're doing. And literally, here's 100% of my paycheck to go back into the ecosystem to help more and more women. Wow, that made me cry.
Wow.
So
and it's like you call it the Freedom Fund
of women helping women. I mean, that is what we're talking about here. And again, these are not just donations, right? Like, yes, we want people to donate. We want them to be monthly donors and help with wraparound services. But guess what? When you buy Sudara goods, you're not donating. You're getting a fantastic product. You would have bought a different product. You're just getting one that's doing a whole lot of good, right? So you're not giving us money and then not getting something amazing in return. So I think that whole mindset of conscious consumerism is like, great, yes, we want you to donate, and we'd love for you to add a donation onto your product purchase because that can even accelerate that impact even more. And we have a way to do that on our website. But if you just straight up want to buy a great gift for someone, you're doing all of this good and you got something for it, something tangible in your hands that you would have bought somewhere else anyway.
And it's just more proof that women, again, to your point, are some of the most powerful forces for good in a community ever. The way that they can encircle each other. And I mean, you saying that women give 90% of their earnings back to their children and communities, that woman gave 100%. I mean, to even think that there is a number bigger than 90% blows my mind. But that is such a pure gift. That is like a widow's mite type of gift completely. We ask all of our guests to give us one good thing. And I wonder what your one good piece of advice would be to give to our community today. Not to sound like a broken record or that I'm beating a dead horse, but it really is that you have more power than you know as a consumer. So when you talked before about, hey, we should tell that, XYZ chocolate company that we don't believe in slave labor and we're not going to buy their chocolate anymore if they're not really transparent about how they're sourcing their beans. Because most of it, and you can look this up, Becky, since you're interested, along the Ivory Coast of Africa, it's mostly child labor that's used to pick cocoa beans. Not cool.
Anyway, that we're not going to do that to fulfill my sweet tooth, right? I'm not going to employ child slaves that don't get to go to school and don't get paid and are malnutrition so that I can have a dessert. Like, that's not cool, right? So the one piece of advice is that you as a consumer have all the power in the world. And we don't get a pass because we're a college student. We don't get a pass because I'm a mom and I'm having, I have to balance a budget and buy things for my kids, and I'm not the Gates family and I'm not Warren Buffett, and they're the ones who should do philanthropy because they have a lot of money. No, we have all the money in our bank account and it gets spent at our discretion. So whether that is $1,000 or you add 5 zeros to that, it doesn't matter. You are the king and queen over those funds and how they're spent. So it's all about power to the consumer, is that you have so much power, even if you feel powerless, even in a political environment where you feel powerless, even there's racial tensions and you feel powerless. Guess what? Every dollar, every penny represents power that you have to vote. You're voting with every purchase. You're voting. $5 purchase at the coffee bar, $100 purchase to buy clothes, going to a restaurant, all of it, you're voting.
And it's like, don't
and guess what? Voting can feel really good and empowering.
Yeah.
So do it often, do it all the time, and do it in a way that resonates with your values. I'm not telling you how to vote. Sure, I have an opinion. I'm just saying, do it, and do it consciously.
Yeah.
You know, we're not victims here. We're empowered voters with our dollars.
Yeah. I love that there's layers. I mean, we can do that with our pocketbook, and which is such a funny term. I don't even know what that is. My wallet.
That's the 1940s purse, John, that my grandma used to carry
80.
around with her white gloves.
Or
But
you
yes.
You can do it with your man purse.
My man purse. Hey, I have
man
one of those.
handbag.
Your purse.
But you're right, though.
You know, we believe when we recorded an episode recently about we want people to become believers in these missions that they can really make a difference. And it's like, it starts with belief that, Becky calling whoever, I don't want to put anybody on the spot because I don't know who's the bad guys in the chocolate world, but it's like, yes, our collective voice can do it. Every movement was started by one person. And I look at you and your husband, Jeff, of just like, y'all were just two people who stood up and said, I'm willing to take this on. And this is the kind of ripple that's happened 15 years later in y'all's lives. And it's very impactful to me to look at that and just think it just takes standing up, going down the road that looked hard.
And the cool part is, you know, you start out kind of trying to do it for the other person, but I think we all know that we become more blessed in the process. Mm-hmm. So even though, you know, we want to have a certain amount of altruistic reasons, at the end of the day, Jeff and I probably get more out of it than anyone, because you just can't outgive. I don't believe you can outgive if you're doing it in community. I mean, sure, burnout is a real thing. Compassion fatigue is a real thing. All of that. There's a definite need for self-care and mental health and all of that. I'm not minimizing that at all. But when you're in a community where you're giving and you know it's right and you know it's aligned, there's such satisfaction and such sweet sleep you get at the end of a hard day. You know, when I put my head on the pillow with no regrets, it feels really good.
Yeah.
Right?
I think
it feels really good.
So think it's even full circle. And how is that child living in the red light district, learning how to plant seeds of abundance too, watching mom go to work as a seamstress and turn her life around? That to me is the exact same thing that's happening on the other side of the world. So we could stay here forever. It's such I mean, this is such a tough topic, but it's such a wholesome conversation. So and I just think that what you're doing is massively important. I want to remind all of our listeners what Jeff said earlier this week, which is he overheard his wife say to somebody one time that if Jeff succeeds, it's going to put her out of business. And that was the nicest compliment he'd ever thought he'd heard from her that he had never thought about. So we are asking you, good communities, do-gooders, come and put Shannon out of business. We want to find all of these women work so that we can move on to another issue that's plaguing our society.
And so how do we do that? Shannon, would you connect us up with Sudara, and how can people find you online? How can they shop?
Yeah, thank you. We would love for all the listeners to come and use the code. The code is do good, and that'll be active for 30 days from the date of this podcast airing. So do good, and you go to sudara.org, SUDARA.org. And there you can do lots of shopping. You can do lots of donating. There are, Christmas jammies and holiday jammies are a thing. There are lots of family who buy new jammies to take their pictures around the tree every single year. Other holidays that they're celebrating for gift giving, Hanukkah, all of it. Just be mindful. We would love to be part of that list. So you can go to sudara.org. There are other items on our website with our collective partners. So it's not only jammies you'll find some really good teas and candles and jewelry and some other fun holiday items that we have as well. And so it's a great gift giving spot for sure. And you can just feel really good about it. It comes, all of our products have a hang tag that kind of tell the story. So even if you're an aunt sending, gifts to someone in another state, because maybe you're not going to be able to gather this holiday season, it will come with this really beautiful story. And we love it so much at Sudara. After the holidays, we get an influx of emails and whatnot saying, hey, my Aunt Susie gave me these. Oh my gosh, it's so cool. I love it. I'm a college student, and how can I help, and how can I volunteer, and how can I get involved? And it's just really fun. So cool. that story resonates, and that people, they love that beyond the pajamas. I mean, they're going to love their jammies. They're going to be their favorites for sure. But beyond that, they're going to remember, and it's going to spark something in them that they'll now research other brands doing good. So thank you so much for thinking of Sudara this holiday season, not only for personal budgets again, but for those of you who have businesses and budgets as part of a larger organization. We would love to connect with you as well.
We're glad you turned down that path. We're glad to be a witness to this amazing change and miracles that you're putting into the world. Thank you to you and your team.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
Thanks for being part of it.
You betcha.
We appreciate you.